and welcome to today's grammar lesson. Today we're going to be carrying on with the work that we've been doing on clauses, which we were introduced to yesterday. Before we start, can everyone please make sure they have a piece of paper and a pen ready, because I'm going to be asking you a few questions during this lesson and you're going to need to write some answers down. So if you haven't got a pen and paper already, pause the video and then when you're back we'll carry on with the questions. Okay, so my first question is, here I've got a recap of what clauses and phrases are related to. So both a clause and a phrase are types of groups of words. Now yesterday we talked about how we can use words together in little groups, and those little groups can either be a clause or a phrase. And we actually went through how to determine if a set of words together is a clause or a phrase. And there were two things that you needed that made a set of words a clause. It has to have two things in it. Can you remember what those two things are? Have a think to yesterday's video and yesterday's work. Maybe you'll remember your clause checklist that you made. Write them down, the two things that you need to make a clause. Okay, hopefully you've remembered that the first thing every clause needs is a verb, which, as we know, is one of our parts of speech. The other type of word a clause needs is a subject. A subject would normally be a pronoun or a noun because it has to be a thing or a person who is doing the verb. So now we remember what a clause is. What is a phrase? Well, a phrase is just any group of words that does not have a verb and a subject. Now we remember what a clause is, we need to learn that there are different types of clauses. Clauses are very, very important because we use them all the time when we're speaking. There are two main types of clauses: independent clauses and subordinate clauses. We did briefly mention independent clauses yesterday, but what does the word independent mean? Well, independent means something that can function on its own. So the key thing about an independent clause is that it can make a sentence without needing any other words with it. Let's take an example. Yesterday you had lots of different sets of words. Some of them were independent clauses. For example, we had the small independent clause, I eat. The reason this is an independent clause is because you can say the words I eat and it makes sense. You're not waiting for any other information. It makes sense on its own. It is a whole sentence. Any independent clause can be a sentence. What are some other independent clauses? All you need is a verb and a subject. So if I think of a verb, let me think of a random word. Throw. Here I have a longer clause. Miss Panata throws the green pen. That's got lots of words in it, not just a verb and a subject. But it's still a clause because it still has the verb and the subject in there. Miss Panata is the subject and throws is the verb. Again, we can check that this is an independent clause because if I say the whole clause out loud, Miss Panata throws the green pen, that can be a sentence. I'm not waiting for any more information. It stands on its own. It functions on its own, and that's why it's independent. The difference between independent clauses and subordinate clauses is that subordinate clauses still have a verb and a subject because they're a clause, type of clause, but they don't make sense on their own. So, for example, let's take this clause. When I finish eating. It is a clause because it has a verb and a subject. The verb is finish, and the person doing that verb, or the subject, is I. So it is a clause, but when I say it, when I finish eating, doesn't it sound strange? There's something missing. When I finish eating, what will happen? I need the rest of the sentence. That's why this is called a subordinate clause, because if I just say this clause on its own, it doesn't make sense. It can't stand independently. In order to make this into a sentence, I would need to add an independent clause, because remember, sentences need to have independent clauses in them. So I could say, when I finish eating, I will go outside and play. The clause, I will go outside and play, is an independent clause. However, when I finish eating is not an independent clause because I cannot leave it on its own. Subordinate clauses often start with conjunctions. Here are some conjunctions you already know that could start a subordinate clause. We've already got when, you could have because, you could have if, you could have although. Let's look at one more example using one of these conjunctions. Let's use although. Although it is raining. You cannot just say this clause on its own, although it is raining. You need to finish that, you need to add more information. Therefore, it's a subordinate clause and not an independent clause. In a minute, you're going to do your task for the day, but first we need to start by writing our date, title and LI. So please pause the video now and write this on your piece of paper. Okay, hopefully you now understand the difference between a subordinate or independent clause. I'm going to talk you through the first example of this exercise to help you so you know how to do it, and then you need to make sure you do it on your own piece of paper. You can do this one with me if you like. It says subordinate or independent. Decide if each of the examples below is a subordinate clause or independent clause. So we need to bear in mind, how do we know if something is a subordinate clause or independent clause? The main way of being able to tell is if it stands on its own as a sentence and it makes sense and you're not waiting for any other information, then it's probably an independent clause. If you're waiting for more information or you feel like the sentence is unfinished, or you feel like it's only half of a sentence, it's probably a subordinate clause. Let's have a look at the first two. Did Miss Panata award the trophy? Does it stand on its own? Did Miss Panata award the trophy? I think it does. Therefore, I'm going to write it in my list of independent clauses. So over here, hopefully you're doing this with a piece of paper and a pen. You just write down underneath your title, did Miss Panata award the trophy? What about the next one? When I eat cookies. When I eat cookies. Can you just say that on its own? When I eat cookies. No, there needs to be more information. Because when I eat cookies, what? What happens when I eat cookies? That gives us a clue that it might be a subordinate clause. Another clue is that it's got a conjunction at the beginning of the clause. When I eat cookies. That's the subordinating conjunction that makes it into a subordinate clause. Therefore, I'm going to put it down here. Oops, there we go. So as you can see, I'm making my list of the different clauses down here. Now I've shown you exactly how to do the task. Have a go on your own. All you need to do is sort the short clauses into the correct lists of either subordinate or independent clauses. Think these through carefully. I know they're really tricky. Pause the video now to complete it. And I'll be looking forward to seeing your work coming through on the Year 3 email address.